Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is lesson 5a of our classical Arabic for the Holy Qur'an lecture series. So this lesson will be looking at two very important topics. The first will be grammatical declension or al-i'rab, and the subject and predicates or al-mubtada wal-khabar. So these terms we've used before, subject and predicate, when we're looking at the nominal sentences, but now we're going to be using the proper grammatical Arabic terminology. So as mentioned, we'll be looking at al-i'rab or grammatical declension states. Now, in particular, we have for nouns 3 grammatical states: raf', jar, and nasb. So it's very important that we become familiar with this terminology, as this is these are the words we're going to use from now on when talking about the grammatical state of nouns: raf', jar, and nasb. So first we'll just review our classification of sentences. We have al-murakkab, which is what we can say phrase, or I guess a bunch of words together. Now, in regards to the phrase can be kalamun naqis, which would be an incomplete sentence, meaning that it would need more information to complete its meaning. And you can have a few of these kalamun naqis working together to give a complete sentence. Or you can just have the kalamun tam, which is the complete phrase, meaning that no more information is needed to give the meaning. And the other word we have for that is al-jumlatul khabariyya, or the sentence with or of news. And that's where the two classifications that we've looked at so far come into play: al-jumlatul ismiyya, the nominal sentence, and al-jumlatul fi'aliyya, the verbal sentence. So if we have a sentence like this, the sentence starts with a noun, an-nahru. So this is obviously a noun because we can see the signs of a noun here, an alif lam. And only nouns or asma will start with the alif lam. So because this sentence here starts with the alif lam, we know that it is a jumlatul ismiyya. And previously we mentioned that the first word of a jumlatul ismiyya was the subject, and the second word was the predicate. But now we'll be using the proper terminology: mubtada for subject and khabar for predicate. So the mubtada is the topic or focus of the sentence. It's what the sentence is going to be talking about. Whereas the khabar is what gives more information, further information about the topic or the focus of the sentence, or the mubtada. And as mentioned before, there is no word for is in Arabic. The word is comes between the mubtada and the khabar. So an-nahru means the river. That's the mubtada. And qaribun means near or close. Now direct translation would mean the river near. But we know that the word is comes between the mubtada and khabar, so the translation would be the river is near. So to sum up what we've just been speaking about, the mubtada is the topic or focus of the sentence, and it's generally an ism and definite, ma'rifah. Okay, so one way of making a noun definite would be the alif lam, as in the previous example. The khabar is information about the topic, and it is also an ism, but it's usually nakira, indefinite, as we saw in the previous example. Now, this is an important definition. A sentence with a mubtada and a khabar is called a nominal sentence, or jumlatun ismiyya, because we're going to contrast that with the verbal sentence. So, here's an example of a nominal sentence. We have هذا أسود. Now, هذا means this. It's an ism ishara. And we know that the ism ishara is a definite noun because it's referring to something specific. And it's also the topic of the sentence. So it's the mubtada. Aswadun is a sifa, so an adjective meaning black. So you would say this with is coming between the mubtada and khabar, black. So this, whatever object it is referring to, is black. Mubtada and khabar. So another example of a nominal sentence with a mubtada and a khabar is hiya ajibatun. Now hiya is a pronoun or dhamir meaning she, or depending on the context, could mean it. So we know that pronouns are definite because they refer to something specific. So here is the mubtada, it's ma'rifa. Ajibatun is the khabar, and you can see it's indefinite. Ajibatun means strange. So the word is comes between the mubtada and khabar. We can say it, being more suitable to the context, it is strange. So this is a nominal sentence. Al-akhu faqirun. So al-akhu means the brother. We can see that it's definite due to the alif lam. Faqirun, the khabar, is indefinite and it means poor. So we can see the genders matching with al-akhu being in the masculine form and faqirun being the masculine form of that sifa. So the brother is poor. Mubtada, khabar. From the Quran, we can see a verse here, or a section of a verse that says, وَأَنْتُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. Now here we have a pronoun, a dhamir, antum. And it means you, in the plural, masculine. And we know that dhamirs, or dhamair, are also nouns. They come under the ism category. ظَالِمُونَ, this is indefinite because there's no alif lam, and it means wrongdoers or oppressors. And it's the khabar in this particular section of the ayah. وَأَنْتُمْ ظَالِمُونَ. And you, plural, are wrongdoers. So depending on whether it's a singular or plural context, we'd use is or are, and that are comes between the mubtada and the khabar. So what about phrases? We've looked at single words in the mubtada and khabar. Now remember I mentioned before that phrases are treated as one unit or one word. Even though they're made up of a few different words, They are treated grammatically as one unit. And that makes sense with something like a jar wa majroor, like fil haqibati, because you can't separate these two from each other. You can't separate the harf jar from the ism majroor. So they're going to be always together and treated as one unit. Now in this case, if we look at this sentence, we have al-fakihatu, which is a definite word, ma'rifah, and it's also an ism, a noun. And due to being at the beginning of the sentence, and with all these in mind, you can safely assume that this, or you can safely know that this is the mubtada. Now, if we take fil haqibati as one unit or one word, as one single phrase, we would say that this is the khabar. So al-fakihatu means the fruit. Fi means in. Al-haqibati means the bag. So in this case, the khabar is definite. So it doesn't always have to be indefinite, but that's because it's a phrase. So you would say the fruit is, coming between the mubtada and khabar, in the bag. So here's an example from the Qur'an where we have the mubtada tilka, an ism ishara, together with a khabar, which is a phrase. Ayatul Qur'ani. So we have an idafa phrase here. And the signs of that is, first of all, a word which has no alif lam and no tanween, which is unusual to see. That's because it's acting as the mudaf to the mudaf ilay, which is the second word here, because that ends with a kasra. So seeing that, it means it's an idafa phrase, something of something, or a possessive. So ayat means verses or signs, and al-Qur'an means the Qur'an. So you would say the verses of the Qur'an. Tilka, usually translated as that. But because we're referring directly to ayat, a broken plural here, we treat it as a feminine singular, meaning that we would use that even though we're talking about many things. So you would say these when you translate. It will be incorrect to use the plural form of the ism ishara here, because we're referring to a singular, to a broken plural, which is treated as a singular feminine. So even though we translate it as these are the verses of the Qur'an, we use the singular feminine ism ishara. And that's the mubtada. The whole phrase is the khabar. And here we have another example with a mubtada, hadha. So what can we say about hadha? It's an ism ishara, meaning that it's indefinite or ma'rifah. It's an ism, so it's the mubtada. Sihrun mubinun, this is a phrase. And you're not going to separate the two units within this phrase. So when we look at it in detail, we can see sihrun, this is indefinite. This is indefinite. They're both masculine. So they match in those four characteristics. So the fact that they're both singular, both indefinite, both ending with a dhamma, and both masculine. So the fact that there we have two nouns next to each other with these four things matching means that it's a phrase, a mawsoof sifa phrase, acting as a single unit as the khabar. So هذا means this. Is comes between the mubtada and khabar. Sihrun means magic. Mubin means clear or obvious. So this is a clear magic. So here's some further examples. We have Sayyaratu Zaydin Jadidatun. So in this case, we actually have the mubtada as a phrase. This is an idafa phrase because we have a noun without a tanween and without an alif lam followed by another noun that ends in a kasra. So this is an idafa phrase, Sayyaratu, meaning the car of Zayd. The car or caravan or vehicle. And because Sayyara is feminine due to the Tam al-Buta, the sifa used to describe it, or the khabar that's going to describe this object, needs to also be in the feminine form, Jadidatun, meaning new. And this is the khabar. Here's your mubtada. The car of Zayd is new. Al-thamaratu, it's definite, alif lam, it's an ism, so this is the mubtada, just this by itself. Because the rest becomes the khabar. But with the khabar here, it's a phrase together intertwining with another phrase. So we have ma'al waladi. That's a harf jar followed by an ism with a kasra. So a jar wa majroor. Ma'al waladi. So al-thamaratu means the fruit. And you put the is between. So here's your mubtada and here's your khabar. The fruit is with the boy. But then we've got ar-rashidi. So this works together with this as a mawsoof sifa phrase. Because they're matching each other. Both alif lam, both have a kasra, both are masculine, both are singular. So it's not just with the boy, it's with the righteous boy, ar-rashid. The fruit is with the righteous boy. And then we have this example here. Fil madinati bintun saghiratun. So let's break this down. First of all, we need to make it clear, an important point here, that the mubtada won't be a jar wa majroor, a prepositional phrase. So this cannot be the fil madinati cannot be the mubtada, even though it's coming first in the sentence. So there are many instances where the mubtada and the khabar swap places with each other. It's not a set rule that the mubtada has to come first and the khabar follows. So once you see a jar wa majroor phrase, you can assume safely that that's the khabar. This here, bintun saghiratun, is a mawsoof sifa phrase because they match in those four things, which you should be able to recognize very quickly now. And that is the mubtada. Now the reason that they've swapped is because the mubtada, the topic of the sentence, is indefinite. It's an indefinite mawsoof sifa phrase. And when you have an indefinite mawsoof sifa phrase, that comes afterwards in the sentence generally. But it's still the mubtada, and this is still the khabar. They've just swapped places. So bintun saghiratun means a small girl. Fil madinati means in the city. So you would say a small girl is in the city. Now we'll begin our look at grammatical states. So we've been saying till this point that, for example, the word al-qalamu ends with a dhamma. So when we're talking about mawsufs of a phrase, we would say the two words end with a dhamma or a fatha, or the mubtada usually ends with a dhamma. But in reality, the term we should be using is raf', because nouns have three grammatical states: raf', jar, and nasb. And there are different ways to indicate the grammatical state of those particular words. So with a singular noun like al-qalamu, the state of raf', the grammatical state, is indicated by a dhamma. So when you see al-qalamu, you would say that this word is in the state of raf'. Another state that words can take is jar. And a singular noun will generally reflect that state with a kasra. So al-qalamu is raf', al-haqibati is jar. Now we can say that a harf jar like fi puts the following singular noun into the state of jar, because words, singular nouns, can change their grammatical states depending on their role in the sentence and what's being acting on it. So here fi is a harf jar, which is acting upon the word that follows, and whatever grammatical state it was in before, it's now turning it into the state of jar, which is reflected by kasra. Because a word like al-haqibati, haqibati, or al-haqibatu, whatever it is, the haraka within the word, like this kasra here, this fatha, this one here, that doesn't change. That's set. Once you change that, you change the word and it's no longer that word, or it's incorrect. However, with nouns, most nouns, the haraka of the last letter can change between fatha, kasra, dhamma. And that doesn't change the actual word itself. Now, what it changes to depends on what grammatical state it's in. So al-qalamu could have been al-qalami or al-qalama. In this case, it's al-qalamu because its role in the sentence is the mubtada. And the mubtada is in the state of raf', which is why it's going to take this dhamma. A singular noun that follows a harf jar is going to take a kasra because it's going to go into the state of jar. So we're going to see with different sentences how when words change roles, or are positioned in different places or have something acting on them, usually a particle, it's going to change the haraka of the last letter to indicate that it's in a different grammatical state. So if you look here, sayyaratu zaydin. Now, sayyaratu zaydin, this is a phrase, an idafa phrase, which we should be able to identify. So this is also the mubtada. Now the mubtada is in the state of raf', which is reflected by a dhamma, as we've learnt. So the first word of this idafa phrase, sayyaratu, needs to end with a dhamma to reflect that state of raf'. However, the second word of this phrase, we've learnt that in idafa phrase, the second word ends with a kasra. So because it's showing a kasra here, that's reflecting the state of jar in that word. So sayyaratu would be in the state of raf', zaydin would be in the state of jar, reflected by the haraka of their last letters. This entire phrase acts together as the mubtada. This one here, jadidatun, is the khabar. Now we also learned that the khabar is in the state of raf, just like the mubtada, which is why jadidatun ends with a dhamma, or dhammatain. So we can say jadidatun is also in the state of raf, just like sayyaratu was. So that brings us to the end of this section of the lesson. We'll continue grammatical states in the following section of this lecture.